I think we just have to acknowledge that sometimes we just get frightened about the complex. And I want to suggest to you that we just live in a world of complex, and having a certain fear and a longing for simple is all fair.
Do you want a wealthy retirement without worrying about money? Welcome to the Retire in Texas podcast, where you will discover how to enjoy your faith, your family, and your freedom in the state of Texas. And now, here's your host, financial advisor, author, and all-around good Texan, Darryl Lyons.
Hey, this is Darryl Lyons, co-founder of PAX Financial Group, and you're listening to Retire in Texas. This information is general in nature only. It's not intended to provide specific investment, tax, or legal advice. Visit paxfinancialgroup.com for more information. Okay, so I'm asking myself a question, and it's a little deep, so hang with me. But do I have an intolerance for the complex? Do we have an intolerance for the complex? So let me explain, and I'm actually going to make it relevant to what's going on in the world today. Like we kind of yearn for this 1950s, which I love the 1950s. If you know me, I enjoy that era. Like the cars were cool, the music is cool, the sports. I think of Johnny Unitas, and just that whole era was just kind of special. I know I told a friend that how much I was endeared to the 1950s, and he's like, well, it wasn't good for everyone. And so, but there is this aura of the 1950s that we yearn for, and entertainment has just gotten more complex. Think about it, like no longer Jackie Gleason. Now we've got Facebook and Instagram Reels. Who would have thought? Our automobiles are certainly more complex. I used to work on my car. I remember in high school, I had a truck. I think it was an 82 GMC truck, awesome single cab. And I worked on it because I blew the engine, and I took the whole thing apart, tagged all the components to put it back together. And I looked at it and I go, I have no idea how to put this thing back together. Ended up selling as is and moved on. But to a certain degree, I could work on cars, and now I don't have a clue. Like the computers that are associated with these vehicles are very difficult. And even our food is more complex. Now it's like organic. You do that. What do you call that? Hydroponic is where, they grow vegetables and just water. They've got a whole facility down at Brook City Base now, and a bunch of choices. Of course, food has gotten more complex. Everything's gotten more complex, and that it does not exclude the global economy and the way we trade with each other, and the stuff that we buy from China or Mexico, and the stuff that they sell back to us. And, it's just not as clean anymore. So you think, okay, I'm going to buy a car from Germany, but the components of those vehicles some of them might be manufactured in the United States, and that could include chips that are in Taiwan or whatever. It's just all interconnected. So it is more complex. And so whenever we see this complexity, oftentimes we get very nervous, and it's fine to get nervous. I mean, that's just like kind of a normal reaction. It's when we respond to that nervousness on the very basis of complexity alone that is problematic. So for example, right now, here's a quote. This might put it in perspective. The president of a brokerage and logistic advisory firm, Krieger Worldwide in Los Angeles, Robert Krieger, he told Bloomberg, this is a quote that I think reflects the sentiment right now. We're still in the freak out period. We're still in the freak out period, and it's because the global trade is becoming a little bit more complex with the new administration, specifically with tariffs. And that's not just Robert Krieger saying this, and of course he's a global logistics firm, so he's got more skin in the game. But in general, the consumer has gotten a little bit nervous too, and that's reflected by something called the Consumer Confidence Index. So December 23rd of 2024, the Conference Board came out with their index, and it declined. And it was a pretty significant decline. It went down to 81.1. And when it hits at about 80, that is supposed to be, these things are always never 100% certainty, but about 80, it signals a recession. Like the consumer's just starting to get nervous, and at that level of nervousness, they start to make some decisions that constrict the economy. Like, I'm not going to buy that house because I want to wait to see how things settle out. Those types of things start to happen. And they say at about that 80 mark on the Consumer Confidence Index is when people start to react to their butterflies in the stomach. They're less optimistic about business. They're concerned about their employment. There's concerned about fewer jobs, of course, politics, and then we do talk a lot now about tariffs, and about half of the people in the world believe that tariffs is just going to make things more expensive. Like we're not dealing with enough with healthcare and the food inflation we've been dealing with, and insurance and everything else. So there's legitimate concerns, and I don't discount those. And of course, when it comes to investing, many people think the stock market is going to struggle to be higher. The Fed Chair Powell, you've heard of him before. I've talked about him. He used this word, and it's interesting whenever they listen to these guys, the Fed chairman, they actually go through the transcripts and identify words that might lead them to believe that the Federal Reserve might do something down the road. So they're looking for clues. And one of the clues they always look when the Federal Reserve chairman is talking is the word uncertain or some version of the word uncertain. And so they looked at Chairman Powell's message just recently, and there was a lot of uncertain, a lot of times that the word uncertain was used quite a bit. He even used the phrase, he said this, so this is not implicit, this was explicit. He said, it feels like we're walking into a dark room full of furniture right now. So there is a lot of uncertainty, and I get that. And the uncertainty is usually, there's a lot of reasons, but I really want to focus in on the uncertainty that's associated with complexity. And the reality is oftentimes when we hit this, and I kind of like to tease out this idea of these cognitive challenges that we have, and making sure that we're not making decisions based on some of these things that exist in our marketplace. Specifically, this time I want to talk about the complexity and how sometimes just the idea of complexity can cause us to make a decision or not make a decision. And what I'm suggesting to you today is that we live in a world of complexity today. And so that to a certain degree has to be embraced, and that risk has to be managed. And we have a bias. We long for this simplicity. We long for that 1950s. Os Guinness, in his book, he wrote a book called Fit Bodies, Fat Minds. It's a good book. He calls this primitivism. Yeah, primitive. Yeah, the love of making America great again. And I'm with you. I want to make America great again. But there's something about, maybe some people believe that is, going back to the 50s, and that's just not possible anymore. Simple is, somewhat of an illusion. And as much as I'd love it, the reality is here we are, and we're going to remain multifaceted and complex and often misunderstood in all of this. And we have to find a way to avoid this impatient and manage all of our own expectations, and develop a degree of tolerance for the complex. We have to develop a degree of tolerance for the complex. The idea, though, is that maybe we don't understand everything and we can accept that. But the idea, and this goes back to basic principles, is that how do we, in the degree of complexity, how do we reduce maybe the catastrophic risk? We often call that tail risk, or something that might blow up in our face. And believe it or not, that's just diversification. So if I go back to Robert Krieger, he said that he's in a freak out period. Well, that's because his business is in logistics, buying and selling stuff internationally. Rightfully so. He's in a concentrated business that is going to have some significant uncertainty in the near future. But if you had invested all your money in logistics, then you have a lot of reason to be nervous. But most of us diversify. So we're going to have, when we look at this, when we navigate through this economy, as people are freaking out, we're going to look at our portfolios and we're going to see some winners and some losers. But generally speaking, this is par for the course. That's how the whole world works. There's going to be ebbs and flows of businesses that are going to navigate through this. And so I'm confident that through diversification, we'll get on the other side of this complexity. We just have to continue. And I know you hear me saying this all the time, staying focused on the long term. And the tariff revenue, or the tariff rhetoric, is going to continue to elevate. We're going to have 10% on tariff on Chinese products, or 60%, 25% from Canada and Mexico. What's the retaliation? What's the impact on currencies? What are the indirect consequences? A lot of these companies are already thinking about how to resolve these challenges. Like, how do I move factories, reduce price, increase volume? I mean, if I'm thinking like, okay, I want to make money off of this complexity, I'm going to, maybe invest in software business that can manage the compliance and logistical issues of this. There's some what I'm saying is there's opportunistic people in this complexity that are going to win, and there's going to be some people that are going to be challenged, but they're already thinking deeply about this. And so what I know to be true is that as we navigate the global complexities that exist, we have a pretty good way of, and I say the collective markets have a good way of finding their way through this and working through this. If you're not familiar with tariffs, there's a lot of history here. Some of them, and I'm not going to get into all of that, but you can look at there's plenty of talk right now on tariffs and interesting history, and of course bias in a lot of the dialogue and perspectives. And I really don't have a right or wrong here. I think in certain scenarios, I can definitely see the merits of tariffs, and I definitely what I do know is that we've gotten a raw deal on a lot of these trade agreements. I know that, for example, there's 138 countries that charge higher tariffs on U.S. goods than we charge them, and so it's like, who made these deals, and why do we have them? And I believe that they're rooted in maybe some maybe a not make America great agenda, and a kind of a global agenda versus make America great. So there's a lot of raw deals out there that need to get right. So I could see the merit for that, and to what degree and who, I'm not sure. They also say protectionism is an element of that, like protecting our manufacturing. I get some of that. And just getting a fair shake in an economy and resetting the negotiations, I think, is extremely healthy. But again, tariffs are, there's complexity to it. There was an article in The Hill, and I'll put a link to this, that has a pretty good example. It says, suppose China offers a tractor that is equal in quality to U.S. made tractors and is 1% cheaper after shipping costs. With no tariff, U.S. tractor factories will close. I mean, people won't buy them. And so then the workers will lose their jobs, right? And some of these workers will require government assistance, unemployment, insurance payments, welfare payments, even maybe Section 8 housing vouchers and other social services. And so what you look at is you go, okay, is it cheaper to provide all this assistance to the manufacturers, or apply a tariff so we can keep this business here and keep people employed? And so that's kind of a simple example, but again, there's going to be some short-term implications. But if we, again, don't have a fear of the complex and just really kind of think long-term and stay diversified, again, I know this is kind of repeating myself, but it's the same solution, but just a different angle. I think we just have to acknowledge that sometimes we just get frightened about the complex. And I want to suggest to you that we just live in a world of complex, and having a certain fear and a longing for simple is all fair. It's how we make decisions out of that fear. I think we have to ask ourselves the question, because money, we've heard this phrase before, money is transferred from the impatient to the patient, but money is also transferred, hear me out, from those who have an intolerance of the complex to those that are complexity tolerant. Money is transferred those that have an intolerance to the complex. No, that's too complex. I just too many things going on. I'm out of here. And it's transferred to those that say, okay, I accept complexity. I'm going to manage that risk by diversifying, and I'm not going to make a decision rooted in fear. So we have to accept tolerance with our food. I get it. It's more confusing to even buy toothpaste now. I have to accept tolerance with my car. I trust it. I just don't know how it works right now. It's kind of overwhelming. I long for Father Knows Best, or Leave It to Beaver, some of those, classics, but here we are, Facebook Reels and YouTube and everything else. And so we've acknowledged the tolerance for complexity in many parts of the world, and so we've got to have this recognition that the global economy is complex, and we don't fully understand it, and we can try to digest it as much as possible. There's plenty of data out there to help you nerd out on this stuff, but at the end of the day, staying true to our principles of thinking long term and staying diversified is my conviction that we will all navigate through this. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be choppy in the interim, and so just recognize that we got to get these things sorted out. And so some people are going to be in freak out mode. That's going to cause the market to go up and down a little bit more. And, for some of us, we're going to be buying in those windows, and some of us are just going to stay the course. But what I'm suggesting to you, as always, is you think different when you think long term. Have a great day.